All right, you have a packet, and in your packet, you'll find a page for you to take some notes on topography. And we're going to begin with describing what a topographic map is. It is a map that shows an area's shape, height, and features using something called contour lines. Now, you can see in your notes there's a little star for you to fill in the word contour lines. Now, just as a reminder, as always, if any point of this video goes too fast to fill in your notes, just pause it. You can always rewind. And it's a welcome idea to watch the video more than once. So, a map that shows an area's shape, height, and features using contour lines. Now, you may be thinking, I've never heard of a contour line. I don't know what that is, right? Don't worry, we're going to be explaining that in a minute. But before we explain that, I want to make sure that you know that map makers use contour lines to represent three different things. We can use them to represent the height above sea level an area is, that is called elevation. We can use contour lines to find the relief of an area, and the definition of relief is the difference in elevation between the highest and lowest parts of an area. And finally, we can look at contour lines and know what the slope is of an area simply from looking at a map. And when I say slope, I mean steepness. So again, just simply glancing at these lines, I can tell if an area has a very steep change in elevation or a more gradual change in elevation. Now, a contour line, and you can see at the very bottom page of your notes here, you have a place to fill this in. Contour lines connect points of equal elevation. So contour lines connect points of equal elevation. And just to make sure that that's incredibly clear, let's look at this line. So contour lines will be closed in a loop. Now, sometimes you can't see the whole loop on a map. You might only see a part of the line that is in the loop. But if this contour line is labeled with an elevation of 1,500 feet, that means that if I am walking in this area that is on this line, that I am staying at an elevation of 1,500 feet. Anywhere on this line, it's 1,500 feet above sea level. There is a one right here, just got cut off. So again, when I look at that definition, right, looking at this forces me to make sure I understand the definition of a contour line. A contour line is a line that connects points of equal elevation. Now you're going to turn the page in your notes. And then you can see that you have a place to put the definition for contour interval. A contour interval is the change in elevation from one line to the next. I'm going to show you what that means here in a minute and how you find it. You're going to need to figure out what each line goes up by on this map. Well, let's look. First, we have this line. This is actually called an index contour. See how it's labeled? So anywhere I'm on this dark line, I am, let's say, 700 feet above sea level. It might be feet, it might be meters, it doesn't say. And I can see there's another index contour line, again, one that's labeled. And this one up here means anywhere that I am in this area, if I am walking on this line on a map, I am staying 800 feet above sea level. So, what do all of these lines of elevation in between? What are they? Because they're not labeled. And I know they're not 700 and I know they're not 800. So, the question is, what are they? Well, the first thing you need to do is you need to notice that there are four lines in between, right? These two. So they're not labeled, so we're going to have to figure out what they are. And it's a really easy thing to do. The first thing that you're going to do is you're going to count how many lines there are in between, including getting up to 800. So I can see if I start at 700, it's going to take me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines to get to 800. So then I find the difference between the numbered lines. So from 700 to 800, that's 100. So take a look at that, make sure that that makes sense. And then I just take 100 divided by the 5 lines it took to go up 100, and I find that each one of these intervals goes up 20 feet. So, and then I always check myself, right? So this is 700. That would mean this was 720, 740, 760, 780, 800. And there you can see that one more time. If they go up by 20s, that should work perfectly, and it does. That's a great way to always find how the unnumbered line should be labeled. Watch that again if you need to see it again. So here's an area where we have, pause, start. Here's an area where we have our area, and this is an old map, so I'm not really sure why this says Waynesville here, but kind of take a minute. If you look, this is Glengarry, and this is our school, or actually, this is the elementary school up on the top of the hill, Indian Riffle, and then here's Kettering Middle School. Here's the loop that eventually makes the rec center, right? And then if you look, here's Dorothy Lane, here's Stroop, where Stroop kind of curves around, right? And so when I think of this area, down right here at Kettering Middle School, it's not incredibly hilly out here behind the rec center. And if you look, see how these contour lines are spaced pretty far apart? That means that if I'm walking in front of the school here on Glengarry, let's say I'm at the rec center, and I'm walking in front of our school, the elevation isn't changing much. See how I would have to go from this line to this line over here before I went up however many feet are in between this particular elevation. Now, the other thing that's interesting, you notice as you get on Glengarry, as you're walking up towards the hill, towards Stroop, you notice, see how right here these contour lines start getting closer together? And I bet you can imagine it, right? As we are headed up towards Stroop, right when we're in front of the elementary school, it gets steep getting up to that corner. And you can tell it gets steeper here because these lines get closer together. Now, I can also see, right, like if this is the rec center, you know how there's that hill out at the rec center? And so I can tell that there's the top of a hill right here. Whenever you see a closed loop like that, you know that you're sort of at a hilltop. So there's a hilltop, and I don't know if you're familiar with back there behind the rec center, behind the pool, but there's that big hill. If you're in sports, you've probably had to run it. So we're relatively flat, right? But we do have some, right, get some hilly areas like here on Glengarry as we get closer to Stroop. The elevation changes much more quickly, so the lines get closer together. Here's an area of it's very mountainous. And when you look, this is mountainous because see how close these contour lines are together? When you see lines that are really, really close together on a topographic map, you know that the elevation is changing very quickly. You don't have to go very far, and your elevation has changed a lot. And so that's what we're seeing here. And again, when I look, these little closed loops mean that I've hit the top of a hill. So here's a hilltop. Here's a hilltop, here's a hilltop, right? Here's kind of two hilltops on the top of one mountain there. So some other things that you need to know that, and I mentioned this, but now we're just going to officially put it down, that a closed loop with no more circles inside of it means you've gotten to the top. And so here is a profile of a hill. And then you can see that every so often at, a certain change in elevation, they're putting a contour line. So this elevation is represented by this line right here. And if I go all the way on the other side, I can see that that line also goes right here, right? So it's showing that point of equal elevation right there. But as I go up to the top of the hill, you can see I'm getting higher and higher. So as I go up to the top of the hill going that way, right, you can see I'm hitting that hilltop right here because there's a closed loop. Every time my elevation changes by a certain amount, they show another contour line. Now you'll also notice if you were to approach this from this side, if you were going to climb to the top of it this way, see how this side is much more steep? You can tell that by looking at a map of this area that that side is steeper because you can see that these lines are closer together. You don't have to go very far and your elevation has changed quite a bit. Whereas over here on this side, your elevation has changed more gradually. So, and you can tell that your elevation, if I didn't want to do a lot of climbing, I would pick this way because my elevation changes more gradually. And again, you can tell that because your lines